The mid-morning sun streamed through the glass walls of Robert Davidson's penthouse office, turning the marble floors into sheets of white light. The air smelled faintly of polished wood and expensive coffee. Nancy Rodriguez kept her head down as she worked, pushing the mop across the vast expanse of the main hallway. Every swish of the mop echoed in the silence, a reminder of just how far she was from the life she once imagined. Her hands were red from bleach, her back already aching from 6 hours on her feet, but there was no time to rest. Rent was due in a week, and Emma's tutoring bill waited on the kitchen counter back home. The elevator dinged, sharp and out of place in the quiet. Nancy looked up and froze. Emma stood there, small against the gleaming metal, her worn pink backpack hanging from her shoulder. "Mama," she said, her voice carrying across the marble. "School let out early, the water pipe broke." Nancy's heart clenched. "Emma, you can't be here," she whispered, hurrying over. "I told you this is—" She glanced toward the far glass door of Davidson's office. The billionaire could emerge at any moment. "Miss Wilson dropped me off," Emma explained. "She said it was on her way." Nancy sighed. Her neighbor meant well, but one wrong moment here and Nancy could lose the job that kept them afloat. She led Emma quickly to the small break room. "Stay here. Don't touch anything. Just sit quietly until I'm done." Emma nodded, but her big brown eyes wandered past her mother's shoulder toward the dazzling open office space. Crystal light fixtures, towering bookshelves, the skyline spread out like a painted backdrop. Nancy returned to work, her pace faster now. She was almost done when it happened. The piercing ring of the red phone on Davidson's desk. It wasn't the usual office line. She knew from whispers among the staff that this was his private secured line fee, or his most important clients, the kind who dealt in billions. The sound seemed to slice through the stillness, urgent and unrelenting. Davidson's voice called from the conference room. "Where is everyone? Answer that!" Nancy glanced around. The receptionist's desk was empty. His assistant was out. The partners were at lunch. She started toward the conference room to alert him, but movement caught her eye. Emma was standing by the desk, one small hand gripping the receiver. "Emma, no." Nancy's words stuck in her throat. Her daughter's voice came out calm and professional. "Davidson International, how may I help you?" A pause. Then, as naturally as breathing, Emma switched to fluent Arabic. "Namse al-arsi assalamu alaikum kifa haluka." Her tone carried the rhythm and confidence of someone who had spoken the language all her life. Nancy stood frozen. This was no school recital, no rehearsed phrase. Emma was holding a conversation, nodding and jotting something down on a scrap of paper as though she belonged here. Then the sound of footsteps, quick, heavy, made Nancy's pulse spike. Robert Davidson emerged from the conference room, his jaw set in a hard line, eyes narrowing as he took in the sight of an 8-year-old child holding his private line. He strode forward, his voice sharp. "What do you think you're—" He stopped mid-sentence. The anger on his face faltered, replaced by something else. Shock. Intrigue. He listened, and for a moment the only sounds were Emma's confident Arabic and the scratch of the pen in her hand. She switched back to English without missing a beat. "Mr. Davidson is unavailable at the moment, but I'll make sure he returns your call within the hour." Then back to Arabic, smooth as silk. Finally she hung up and looked up at him with a bright smile. "Mama, that was Mr. Khalid Al-Farsi from Saudi Arabia. He says the deal is ready, and the $66 million will be transferred once you call him back with the final codes." The room was silent. Davidson stared at her, then at Nancy, his voice low and deliberate. "How?" he said. "Does she know Arabic?" Nancy's knees felt weak as she guided Emma away from the desk, her heart still hammering from what had just happened. Davidson had not moved, his tall figure framed by the Manhattan skyline, eyes locked on the small girl clutching the scrap of paper like a seasoned assistant. For a man who built empires on control, he seemed momentarily at a loss for words. "Miss Rodriguez," he said finally, his voice even but charged with an undercurrent she couldn't place. "Bring your daughter to my office, now." Nancy wanted to protest, to shield Emma from whatever was coming next, but there was no mistaking the command in his tone. Inside, Davidson's private office was more like the inner chamber of a museum than a workplace. Rare art on the walls, polished wood that glowed under the sunlight, shelves lined with leather-bound volumes that looked untouched. He gestured toward the two chairs in front of his desk, then took his seat, steepling his fingers as he studied them both. "You just saved an $866 million deal," he said, his gaze shifting from Emma to Nancy. "I have been trying to get Khalid Al-Farsi to finalize that agreement for months. He refuses to speak English. My translator quit this morning." His eyes narrowed slightly. "Tell me, how many languages does she speak?" Nancy's palms felt damp. "7, she admitted. English, Spanish, French, Mandarin, Russian, Portuguese, and Arabic." The corner of Davidson's mouth lifted almost imperceptibly. At 8 years old, Nancy hesitated, then drew in a breath. "I was a language specialist before," her voice faltered, "before life changed. I have a master's in linguistics from Georgetown. I was working on my PhD when I got pregnant. Emma's father was my professor. When I told him, he denied every day. I was dismissed from the program. With no degree and no recommendations, I took any work I could find. I taught Emma from birth, recordings while she slept, daily practice, immersion in different languages. By 4, she was fluent in 4. By 6. Arabic came last year." Davidson leaned back, silent for a long moment. Outside the window, the city shimmered in the afternoon light, but inside the room, the air seemed to tighten around them. "You're wasting your talents," he said at last. "I'm surviving," Nancy countered, "and giving Emma opportunities I lost." Something sharp glinted in his eyes, but his tone softened. "Survival is admirable, but survival doesn't change the game. You just proved your daughter can operate at a level most executives twice her age can't reach. That kind of gift," he said, tapping a finger against the desk, "shouldn't be hidden behind a mop bucket." He reached for his phone. "Janet, cancel my afternoon. Prepare an employment contract for Miss Rodriguez. New title, Chief Multilingual Communication Specialist. Starting salary $200,000. Full benefits. And call Carmichael Academy's admissions office." Nancy blinked. "What are you doing?" "Making you an offer," Davidson replied. "Effective immediately, you no longer clean my office, you work for me properly. And Emma," he added, turning his gaze to the little girl, "will be given the best education in the city." Emma's eyes widened, but Nancy's stomach twisted. Offers like this didn't come without strings. "Why?" she asked. "Because I never waste potential," Davidson said simply. "Yours or hers." He slid a sleek folder across the desk. "Read it. Sign it. This is the kind of door that only opens once in a lifetime." Nancy stared at the folder, her fingers tingling. It was everything she had dreamed of providing Emma: security, education, a future free from the grind that had defined her own life. But deep down, something about the way he watched her daughter made her chest tighten. Davidson leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice. "Think carefully, Miss Rodriguez. The world doesn't hand you chances like this without reason. I'm giving you the keys. All you have to do is walk through the door." Outside, the city moved on, traffic humming, sunlight glinting off glass towers. But inside Davidson's office, Nancy knew she was standing on the edge of a decision that would change everything. She could feel it in the stillness, in the way Emma's small hand slipped into hers under the desk. Nancy met Davidson's gaze, and for the first time she wondered if the real price of opportunity was something far more dangerous than money. The first weeks in Nancy's new role felt like stepping into another universe. Her mornings no longer began with hauling a mop bucket into Davidson International's penthouse offices. Instead, she arrived in tailored blouses, carrying a sleek leather briefcase that the HR department had provided along with her ID badge. Her name, Nancy Rodriguez, Chief Multilingual Communication Specialist, was printed in gold letters on the frosted glass door of her own corner office. The space smelled of fresh flowers and leather, the view sweeping out over the East River like something from a movie. Emma, meanwhile, had traded her public school in Queens for the polished corridors of Carmichael Academy. Each morning she walked through towering oak doors in a crisp uniform, her hair neatly tied back, blending with the rows of children who came from old money families and diplomatic dynasties, or at least she tried to blend. It didn't take long for Nancy to notice the cracks in the dream. The first sign came 3 weeks into the term when the school's headmistress called Nancy in for a brief discussion. Emma had, it seemed, corrected her French teacher in front of the entire class, politely but firmly, on the proper pronunciation of qui, anscasate. The teacher had been mortified. The headmistress's voice was smooth but cool as she said, "While we appreciate Emma's remarkable abilities, Carmichael values respect for authority above all else. Challenging a teacher in public is not acceptable." Nancy, sitting across from the polished oak desk, asked a single question. Was she wrong? The headmistress' lips thinned. That is not the point. The second sign came in the form of a small silver bracelet. Emma brought it home one evening saying Mr. Davidson had given it to her for doing well in school. Nancy's stomach tightened. It was tasteful, expensive, and entirely inappropriate. When she asked Emma if other children received gifts from him, Emma shrugged. "No, but he says I'm special. He says I remind him of himself when he was my age." From then on, Nancy began to notice Davidson's presence everywhere in Emma's new life. He showed up at school to check on her progress, sat in the audience for her language club presentations, and once even arranged for Emma to meet a visiting ambassador from Morocco to practice her Arabic with a native speaker. Emma beamed after these encounters, her admiration for Davidson growing with each interaction. It was during a Friday afternoon staff meeting that Nancy realized just how closely he was watching. She was presenting her cultural translation strategy for an upcoming deal with a Kuwaiti investment group when Davidson interrupted. "Emma and I discussed this last week," he said casually, as if her 8-year-old daughter were a member of the executive board. "She suggested we use more colloquial phrases in the opening correspondence. She's right, make the adjustment." The board members chuckled, but Nancy's spine went rigid. Emma was spending more time with him than she'd realized. That night, Nancy tried to talk to her daughter over dinner. "Mija, I know Mr. Davidson likes you, but he's a very busy man. Maybe you shouldn't." Emma cut her off. "Mama, he told me I'm going to do something important one day, something that could help the whole world. Don't you want that?" The innocence in her voice nearly broke Nancy's heart. She wanted Emma to dream big. She wanted her to believe she could change the world. But the way Davidson spoke about importance made it sound less like a dream and more like a plan, his plan. The tipping point came when Nancy received an email marked urgent from Carmichael's administration. Emma had been invited to an exclusive cultural immersion weekend, hosted by an international education group at a luxury resort upstate. The itinerary included language workshops, mock diplomacy exercises, and no mention of parental attendance. When Nancy asked who organized it, the coordinator mentioned a familiar name, Margaret Whitmore, founder of something called the Global Youth Initiative. Davidson's fingerprints were all over it. That evening, as rain streaked the windows of their new apartment, Nancy stood in the kitchen, the email glowing on her phone. She could hear Emma humming in the next room, practicing a Hindi song one of her classmates had taught her. And in that moment, Nancy knew the golden door Davidson had opened was no gift. It was a cage, gleaming, comfortable, but a cage nonetheless. The invitation to the cultural immersion weekend arrived on embossed cream stationery, delivered by courier to Nancy's office at Davidson International. It was sealed with a gold emblem of an open globe surrounded by laurel leaves. The words were elegant, almost regal. The Global Youth Initiative cordially invites Emma Rodriguez to join a select group of the world's most promising young minds. Nancy read it twice, the unease in her stomach deepening with every line. A weekend retreat, parents not required, specialized talent assessments, private sessions with program mentors. The name Margaret Whitmore was printed at the bottom in looping, confident script. It was the same woman she'd heard mentioned in passing by Davidson's assistant, the one rumored to run an elite boarding program in Switzerland for gifted children, a place where young prodigies blossomed into leaders, if you believe the glossy brochures. But Nancy had already started hearing whispers from translators and contacts in her old academic circles. The whispers said something else. Children went in at 9 or 10 and came out as polished instruments, brilliant, yes, but loyal to someone else's vision, someone else's cause. That night, Nancy sat at the kitchen table with the letter spread out in front of her. Emma padded into the room in her pajamas holding a cup of warm milk. "Mama, did you see the envelope I brought you? Mr. Davidson said you'd be happy. He says this program is where the real opportunities are." Nancy forced a smile. "Emma, do you know what this place is?" Emma's eyes lit up. "It's in the mountains in Switzerland. They have classes in all the languages I speak, plus some I've never tried, like Swahili, and they teach you how to negotiate like diplomats." She was practically glowing. Nancy's heart twisted. How could she tell her daughter that the dream she was describing was a lie wrapped in silk? "We'll talk about it," she said gently. "It's a big decision." The following morning, Davidson appeared at her office door without knocking. "Miss Rodriguez," he said, his voice as smooth as the dark suit he wore. "I trust you received the invitation?" "Yes," she said carefully. "I'm not sure it's the right time for Emma. She's adjusting to Carmichael. She's happy there." "Happiness," Davidson replied, stepping into the room, "is not the same as fulfillment. That program could accelerate her abilities beyond anything Carmichael can offer. The leader she'll meet there could open doors for her that you can't even imagine." Nancy met his gaze. She's 8 years old. She should be imagining her own doors, not having them chosen for her. His expression hardened just slightly. "Don't let your fear hold her back. The Global Youth Initiative doesn't invite just anyone. This is the first step towards something extraordinary." "Extraordinary for her or for you?" Nancy asked. Davidson's smile didn't falter, but the silence between them was loaded. "I've already told Margaret you'd be attending the introductory dinner." He placed a hand on the back of the chair across from her, leaning in. "Don't embarrass me, Nancy. Some opportunities vanish the moment you hesitate." That evening, determined to understand exactly what she was dealing with, Nancy dug deeper. She called an old colleague from her Georgetown days, a former academic who now worked in international child advocacy. When she mentioned the program, the line went quiet for several seconds. "Nancy," her friend said finally, "you need to keep Emma away from that place. I've seen the files. They call it immersive education, but it's psychological conditioning. They sever family ties under the guise of independence. Once the bond is broken, the child's loyalty belongs to the institution and the sponsors behind it." Nancy's grip tightened on the phone. "Sponsors like Robert Davidson?" "Exactly like Robert Davidson. And Nancy, once a child is inside, there's no legal mechanism to get them out." The next day at Carmichael, Emma came home with something new, a delicate enameled music box shaped like a swan. "From Mr. Davidson," she said proudly. "It plays a song when you open it." She lifted the lid. A lilting melody filled the air, but underneath it Nancy caught the faintest static hiss. Something about it made her skin prickle. That night, after Emma had gone to bed, Nancy examined the box under a lamp. The hinge was too heavy for Sue's. It's a small mechanism. When she twisted it open, her breath caught. Inside, hidden beneath the false bottom, was a tiny recording device. The files were labeled with dates, days Emma had been at school, at language club, even during playdates. And there, among the folders, was one marked GYI Candidate 003, Audio Portfolio. Nancy's pulse roared in her ears. This wasn't a gift, it was surveillance. A portfolio of Emma's abilities being built without her consent, proof for the program, evidence for the people who wanted to take her daughter. She stared at the music box, her hands trembling, and knew that the time for quiet hesitation had passed. Davidson wasn't offering Emma an opportunity, he was laying a claim, and if Nancy didn't act soon, he would succeed. Nancy didn't sleep that night. She sat at the kitchen table long after midnight, the music box lying open in front of her like a confession. The tiny recorder gleamed under the soft yellow light, its blinking indicator winking at her as if mocking her hesitation. She had listened to enough of the files to know the truth. Emma's voice in Arabic, French, Mandarin, Spanish, English, Russian, and Portuguese. Davidson had compiled them neatly, each clip labeled with the date, the setting, and even notes about her pronunciation. It wasn't just evidence of her abilities. It was a dossier. By morning, Nancy had made a decision. She couldn't confront Davidson yet, not without leverage of her own, but she could find someone who understood what she was up against. She scrolled through her phone, hesitating over a name she hadn't spoken to in years, Miguel Ortiz. They had studied together at Georgetown before his career took him into the diplomatic corps. Now he worked in New York as a liaison to the United Nations. When she called, his voice was warm but tinged with curiosity. "Nancy, I thought you vanished." "I need your help," she said. "It's about my daughter. It's about Robert Davidson." She met him later that afternoon in a quiet coffee shop 2 blocks from the UN. Miguel listened as she explained, his expression growing darker with every detail. When she told him about the music box, his jaw tightened. "I've heard whispers about Davidson's connections to the Global Youth Initiative. Nancy, this isn't just about your daughter. That program, there are reports it's a front for talent acquisition and intelligence and high-stakes negotiation. Governments and corporations pay to sponsor a child. Once they're in, they're trained to serve those interests for life." Nancy's stomach churned. "They want to take Emma to Switzerland. He says it's the opportunity of a lifetime." "For him, maybe. Not for you, and not for her." Miguel lowered his voice. "There's someone who might help. Khaled Al-Farsi." The name jolted Nancy. The man Emma spoke to on Davidson's red phone? The same. He's one of the wealthiest men in the Middle East, and one of the few investors who's cut ties with the initiative. He had a daughter, lost her to the program years ago. He's in New York this week. I can arrange a meeting, but you need to be discreet. Davidson cannot know. The next afternoon, Nancy found herself walking through the hushed, gold-lit lobby of the Plaza Hotel. The place was a world away from her cramped Queens apartment, a world Davidson lived in effortlessly and she had only glimpsed. She clutched her bag, aware that inside it was the music box and a flash drive containing all its recordings. A tall man in a tailored thobe stood by the grand piano, silver streaking his beard. His eyes were sharp, assessing yet not unkind. "Ms. Rodriguez," he greeted, extending a hand. "And this must be the remarkable Emma." Emma, wide-eyed but composed, responded in flawless Arabic. "It is an honor to meet you, sir." Al-Farsi's lips curved in a faint smile before he switched to English. "You remind me of my daughter once upon a time." He led them to a private suite where a table was set with tea and delicate pastries neither Nancy nor Emma touched. When Nancy explained what she had discovered, Al-Farsi listened without interruption. Finally he said, "Robert Davidson is not unique. There are men like him in every capital, men who see talent not as a gift but as a commodity. They collect it, mold it, and use it until there is nothing left of the person who once owned it. The initiative is their finest tool." "Then why invest with him?" Nancy asked. "Once I thought I could influence him, change the machine from the inside. I was wrong." Al-Farsi's gaze softened slightly. "When I heard your daughter's voice on that call, I knew he had found another jewel to add to his collection. I will not see history repeat itself." He reached into his briefcase and slid a folder across the table. Inside was a formal employment contract. Nancy, as Director of Multilingual Outreach for the Linguistic Heritage Foundation, his philanthropic branch. The package included a London relocation, a salary equal to what Davidson paid her, and full tuition at an international academy for Emma. Nancy stared at the pages. "If we leave, Davidson will come after us. He's already threatened custody." Al-Farsi's expression darkened. "Leave that to me. The device you carry does not just contain recordings of your daughter. It captured private conversations that could be very damaging to Robert Davidson. Corporate espionage is a serious matter, even for men like him." Emma looked between them, sensing the gravity in the room. "Mama? What's happening?" Nancy forced a smile, but her grip on her daughter's hand tightened. "We're being given a choice, mija, one that might keep us together." Al-Farsi inclined his head. "You have 48 hours. After that, my offer will be harder to arrange." As they left the plaza, Nancy felt the weight of the decision pressing down on her. 2 days to dismantle the life Davidson had built around them. 2 days to choose between running towards safety and standing her ground in a battle she might not win. What she didn't yet realize was that Davidson already knew she had met with Al Farsi and was preparing his own move to make sure Emma never left his orbit. The city was drowning in gray the morning Nancy stepped off the curb outside Davidson International, the sky heavy with rain that blurred the edges of the glass towers. She clutched her umbrella tight, her mind replaying the meeting at the plaza like a film she couldn't pause. Al Farsi's offer sat in her purse in the form of neatly printed contracts, the music box recordings locked away on a flash drive. 48 hours. That was all she had to decide, and Davidson was already circling. She barely made it through the revolving doors before she saw him waiting near the elevator bank, flanked by 2 senior executives. His face was unreadable, but his eyes tracked her every step. "Miss Rodriguez," he said smoothly, dismissing the others with a flick of his hand. "My office, now." Once the door closed behind them, he didn't sit. Instead, he stood by the window, his reflection fractured in the rain-slicked glass. "Khaled Al Farsi has withdrawn all pending investments," he said without preamble. $866 million. Gone. Overnight. You wouldn't happen to know why, would you? Nancy kept her voice steady. Perhaps he discovered something that changed his mind. Davidson turned, the faintest curl of a smile on his lips. "Perhaps he discovered you've been meeting him behind my back. Do you think I don't know when one of my executives has a secret meeting with a man who's been sniffing around my company?" She forced herself not to flinch. "If the is about Emma, then it's always about Emma," he snapped, then reined himself in with a deep breath. "You're making a mistake. That man will use her just as much as anyone else would. At least with me, she has someone who understands her value." "Her value is not for you to decide," Nancy shot back. He studied her for a long moment, then reached into his desk drawer and slid a legal document toward her. Custody papers. Her stomach dropped as she scanned them. James Harlow's name at the top, her old professor, the man who had walked away before Emma was born. He was asserting paternity and petitioning for full custody on the grounds that Nancy was interfering with the child's educational opportunities. "You coerced him," she said, her voice low and sharp. "I presented him with options," Davidson replied coolly, "just as I'm doing for you. Sign consent for Emma to attend the Global Youth Initiative and the custody petition disappears. Refuse and the hearing is set for next month. Harlow has the pedigree, the resources, and let's be honest, the court's bias on his side. You'd lose." Nancy's pulse roared in her ears. "And if I walk away with her now?" His smile was thin and certain. "You won't get far. Not without my agreement. But I'm offering you something better, partnership. You can remain in her life, even guide her education, but she'll have access to the initiative's resources. You'd be foolish to turn it down." She gathered the papers with trembling hands, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "I need time to think." "You have until Friday," he said. "After that, the choice is no longer yours." By the time she reached the street, the rain was coming down harder, plastering her hair to her face. She ducked into a narrow cafe and called Miguel. "It's worse than I thought," she told him. "He's using Harlow to force me into the program. I don't have a Montan. I have 3 days." Miguel's voice was steady but urgent. "Then you use what you have, the recordings from the music box, the ones that prove he's been collecting and transmitting data on Emma without consent. That's corporate espionage, Nancy. Al Farsi could take that to the right people and make Davidson back off fast." That night, she met Al Farsi again, this time in a quiet side entrance of the Metropolitan Museum after hours. He examined the flash drive, his brow furrowing as he scrolled through the files. "This is more than I expected," he said finally. "Conversations with foreign officials, discussions of trade negotiations. He's been leveraging your daughter's presence in ways that could cause international consequences." "Can it stop him?" she asked. A slow smile formed. "It can do more than stop him. It can make him very cautious about pursuing you. But we'll need to move quickly. I can have a plane ready in 36 hours. London. New identities for both of you. You'll start at the foundation the following week." Nancy hesitated. "If we disappear, he'll know who helped us." "I'll take that risk," Al Farsi said. for reasons you'll understand one day. The following evening, while Davidson attended a high-profile charity gala uptown, Nancy collected Emma from Sophia's apartment where she'd been staying for safety. They went home, packed the essentials, clothes, documents, the flash drive, and slipped out under cover of rain. At the private hangar, Al Farsi's jet waited, engines humming like a heartbeat. Emma pressed her face to the window as the plane lifted into the clouds. "Mama," she whispered, "are we running away?" Nancy pulled her close, her voice breaking but certain. "We're running toward something better." Below them, the city lights faded into darkness, and with them, the grip of a man who had tried to own their future. But in the shadows of his penthouse row, Bert Davidson was already on the phone, vowing this wasn't over. London greeted them with its familiar drizzle and the muted hum of black cabs along rain-slicked streets. For weeks, Nancy woke every morning expecting the knock on the door, the letter slid under the frame, the phone call from an unknown number that would drag them back to New York. But those weeks stretched into months, and in that time, she and Emma began to build something that felt startlingly like peace. Their flat in South Kensington was a second-floor Victorian with tall sash windows and ivy climbing the brick facade. From her bedroom, Emma could hear the bells of St. Mary's on quiet Sunday mornings. The International Academy became her second home, a place where speaking multiple languages wasn't strange but celebrated. She made friends from Tokyo, Madrid, Nairobi. At lunchtime, she and her classmates traded phrases in Hindi, Swahili, and Tagalog like other children traded stickers. Nancy's position at the Linguistic Heritage Foundation gave her a purpose beyond survival. She coordinated teams working to preserve endangered dialects in the Amazon and the Caucasus, and her translation algorithm was attracting attention from cultural ministries and universities. Still, Davidson's shadow lingered in her mind like a phantom. Then, one gray March afternoon, Penelope, Al Farsi's no-nonsense assistant, appeared at Nancy's office door, her voice low. "There's someone here to see you. She insists it's urgent." Nancy stepped into the lobby and froze. The woman waiting was striking, tall with dark hair swept into a chignon, her suit immaculate. But it was her eyes, sharp and assessing, that made Nancy's pulse quicken. "I'm Sophia Davidson," she said, offering a hand. "Robert Davidson's daughter. We need to talk." They sat in a small conference room overlooking Regent's Park. The air between them was taut. "My father is dying," Sophia said plainly. "Pancreatic cancer, months left at most." She met Nancy's gaze. "He speaks of Emma constantly, calls her his most important legacy." Nancy's fingers curled against the table. "Legacy? He tried to take her from me." "I know," Sophia admitted. "I won't defend what he's done. But as he loses ground to the illness, his obsessions intensify. He has people looking for you. That's why I'm here." She slid a folder across the table. Inside were legal documents barring Davidson from contact with Emma, along with a trust fund in Emma's name. Once he signs these, it becomes binding, regardless of what happens to him. "Why help us?" Nancy asked, suspicion sharpening her tone. Sophia's eyes softened. "Because I was Emma once, not in New York, Geneva. A different version of the Global Youth Initiative. I came back to my father speaking 5 languages and understanding geopolitics, but I didn't know how to be his daughter. I don't want that for her." When Nancy left the foundation that night, London's street lamps glowed against the mist. She thought of Davidson alone in his penthouse, of the man who had seen in Emma a mirror of himself, and for a moment she almost felt pity. But then she remembered the music box, the custody papers, the cold certainty in his voice when he told her she would lose. Pity had no place here. 2 years later, news came quietly. Robert Davidson had died 8 months after Sophia's visit. Life had moved forward. Emma, now 13, was the youngest cultural ambassador at her school. Nancy's work had expanded to a global network of projects. For the first time in years, the past seemed to have released its hold, until the email arrived. Estate matters finalized. Father's personal effects include items concerning E. Please advise regarding disposition. SD. Before Nancy could reply, her receptionist's voice, it crackled through the intercom. There's a visitor for you, no appointment. She says her name is Layla Al-Farsi. Layla was in her 30s, poised, her features a blend of European and Middle Eastern heritage. I know of you through my father, she began. He says your case is the most important intervention he ever made. My case? Nancy asked cautiously. I spent 7 years in the Geneva program, Layla said quietly. I know what it takes from a child. That's why I've been working with Sophia Davidson to change it. She reached into her bag and produced a slim tablet. On the screen was a document titled, The Rodriguez Method. Nancy blinked. What is this? Your teaching techniques, Layla explained. Your immersion approach, the emotional security you gave Emma, that's the foundation. Before he died, Robert Davidson concluded that the key to her abilities wasn't just exposure to languages, it was you. He wanted this method to replace the separation model, no more taking children from their families. The program could still develop their gifts without breaking them. Nancy's breath caught. He changed his mind? In his own way, Layla said. We want you to help us pilot it. There's a boy in Morocco, 8 years old, fluent in 4 languages. This time he stays with his family. You guide them. That night, Nancy told Emma everything. To her surprise, Emma smiled. Mama, if it stops other kids from going through what he tried to do to me, you should help them. Maybe he finally understood. Nancy looked at her daughter, no longer the shy 8-year-old who'd picked up the red phone, but a confident young woman who could navigate any room in any language. She realized Emma was right. This wasn't about Davidson anymore. It was about closing the door on the old way and building something better. And for the first time since that call all those years ago, Nan, Sai felt the weight lift.